Welcome back to the Rules Plus podcast. Today's episode is the fifth of 12 preseason episodes focused on the 12 chapters of the Rogers-Reading Study Guide to NCAA Football Rules, now authored by George Demetrio. In the last four episodes, we reviewed the corresponding chapters of the study guide. In episode 1 for 2024, chapter 1, concerning the purpose and format of the Reading Study Guide. Episode 2, Chapter 2, concerning recent rules changes. Episode 3, Chapter 3, concerning the kicking game. And last week, that is the fourth episode, Chapter 4, concerning scrimmage requirements. Today's topic is Chapter 5, concerning the passing game. As the topics of the Reading chapters indicate, the Reading Study Guide is organized around phases of the game rather than around robotically listed rules and sequences isolated silos. It's this philosophy that recognizes the symbiotic, interdependent nature of football rules that makes the Reading Study Guide such a useful and valued resource. This podcast is similarly based on the phases of the game concept, though my preferred metaphors for this integrative synthesizing approach to study are that rules live in neighborhoods and they tend to behave like siblings separated at birth. In fact, in 2023, I did a series of episodes based on this idea of discerning whether 15 rules dyads interact as good neighbors or as quarreling siblings. As a result, in these first four episodes for 2020, I've found it useful to recommend to you specific episodes from 2023 that provide greater depth and detail about the topics that have arisen in these first four chapters of the Reading Guide. I anticipate that today's episode will draw on several themes from four of the dyads from my 2023 set of 15: kicker versus passer, illegal pass versus intentional grounding, kicks crossing the neutral zone versus passes crossing the neutral zone, and forward pass versus backward pass. Stay tuned. Now on to Chapter 5, the passing game in depth. When the topic of the passing game comes up, I suspect most of us think of topics related to legal forward passes, but Chapter 5 reminds us that we should also think about studying topics related to illegal forward passes and to backward passes. So, while Chapter 5 addresses 12 topics directly related to legal forward passes, it also includes 5 topics directly related to illegal forward passes and 2 topics directly related to backward passes. I find that the special dividend offered by Chapter 5 is its coverage of ancillary concerns that we may be inclined to pass over in our study, such as forward progress, muff versus fumble, the momentum rule, and illustrative contrasts between elements of the passing game and elements of the kicking game. I'll spend a lot of our time on these more obscure topics that we should devote more study time to. But to start, let's look at some fundamentals that Chapter 5 opens with. Well, coming to terms. What terms do we know? Do we know what a pass is? That's not a dumb question when you consider that one of the toughest calls for us who work the referee position is how a ball became loose. Did the quarterback fumble or was he throwing? Was the tap of a ball a pass or a bat? Is the ball loose from a forward pass or from a backward pass? Wing and deep officials may also occasionally have such a call to make. When does a loose ball lose its status as a pass? By definition, quote, a pass is a ball that has been thrown, either forward or backward. It remains a pass until it is caught or intercepted, or until it hits the ground or touches something out of bounds. End quote. That's from Rule 219.1. So, for example, if Team A tips or muffs the ball behind or beyond the neutral zone, Is it still a pass? What about if Team B tips or muffs? Knowing when a pass ends has implications for determining whether certain fouls have occurred, what kind of play is going on when certain potential fouls occur, or what the enforcement spot should be for a foul. We also know, I presume, what a passer is. By definition, quote, the passer is the player who throws a forward pass. He is the passer from the time he throws the ball until it is no longer a pass or until he moves to participate in a play. That is from 227.5. Now be honest, if you'd been asked a moment ago, would you have known definitively that only a player who throws forward is regarded as a passer? That's a technicality that would be very nice to remember explicitly in a situation in which your ruling is being questioned when a quarterback loses the ball while being sacked, along with related technicalities, including what's a forward pass, what's a fumble, what's a backward pass. With definitions of pass and passer settled, Chapter 5 opens with discussion of two core principles for the passing game. How do we know whether a pass is forward? And how do we know whether a potential passer has thrown forward or not? We know the status of a pass by noting the spot where the ball first touches someone or something relative to the spot where the ball was released. But there's an exception when a defender contacts the passer or the pass after any intentional forward movement of the passer's hand with the ball firmly in control. If the potential passer, however, clearly starts to bring the ball back to his body while still in full control of the ball, he has fumbled it if it comes loose. Chapter 5 explains that, quote, the purpose here is to give the passer the benefit of the doubt, whether the ball was thrown or fumbled, noting that 219.2c says so, with the most instructive exception related to the when in question principle. Here's the rule, quote, when in question, the ball is passed and not fumbled during an attempted forward pass. Exception, games using instant replay, end quote. Indeed, standard number 2 in section 3 of the NCAA officiating standards provides that, quote, when in question regarding whether the quarterback passed or fumbled, it will be ruled a fumble, end quote. We don't have instant replay, so Chapter 5 is correct that we should give quarterbacks the benefit of the doubt. I have a quibble here that I can't resist sharing, since after all, this is what Rules Plus is all about, is quibbling. Both the rule and Chapter 5 refer generically to the passer, while the rule standard refers specifically to the quarterback. It's not likely that the NCAA intends for there to be inconsistency between a rule and a stated standard, so I chalk this up to poor proofreading. If we see a Gary Yepremian pass attempt in a college game, I don't think this typo will matter anyway. Chapter 5's opening coverage of important terms continues with another important technicality about terms. A forward pass is complete, whether it's legal or illegal, when any inbounds player of the passing team catches the ball. But a forward pass is intercepted when any inbounds player of the other team catches the ball. And these two technical terms introduce additional important term technicalities, including catch, tipping, batting, touching, airborne player, forward progress, and out of bounds, all of which are important facets of determining when a forward pass is incomplete. A forward pass is incomplete, again, regardless of whether it's legal or illegal, when it touches the ground or goes out of bounds. A loose ball, including a pass, is out of bounds when it touches anything or anyone that is out of bounds. An airborne player who controls a pass makes it incomplete if he first makes contact with the ground on or outside a boundary, including a pylon. As in basketball, an airborne player retains the same status as inbounds or out of bounds that he had when he left the ground. And touching the ball always precedes catching it. So if touching a pass makes it incomplete, securing possession a moment later is irrelevant. A completed pass always remains live except in 4 cases: a catch in the opponent's end zone, a catch while grounded, a catch by an airborne receiver who is held and carried before he can return to the ground, and a simultaneous catch by opposing players. An incomplete forward pass causes the ball to become dead. Now on to legal and illegal forward passes. A peculiarity of the rules is that Rule 7.3 largely defines a forward pass by inference by referring to what is illegal, as if saying a pass is legal as long as it isn't illegal. Rule 7.3.1 does say that Team A may make one forward pass during each scrimmage down from in or behind the neutral zone before team possession changes. Rule 732 covers the rest of the story, prescribing in effect, if not in explicit language, 2 categories of illegal activity. Category 1: a forward pass is illegal if thrown by a Team A player whose entire body is beyond the neutral zone, if thrown by a Team B player, if thrown after team possession has changed, if it's the second forward pass, if thrown after a Team A ball carrier's entire body has been beyond the neutral zone. Category 2: a forward pass is illegal if thrown to conserve time by means of delaying spiking the ball or spiking a ball that has touched the ground, if thrown to conserve time into an area where there is no eligible Team A receiver, if thrown to conserve yardage into an area where there is no eligible Team A receiver. The penalties prescribed for fouls in the 2 categories differ, and there is the major exception to Category 2 fouls if the player who controlled the snap is or has been outside the tackle box. What we see here with the 2 categories is the distinction between an illegal forward pass and intentional grounding, although that latter term doesn't actually appear in the rules book. The penalty for an illegal forward pass includes a loss of down and a loss of 5 yards from the spot of the foul. The penalty for intentional grounding is simply a loss of down at the spot of the foul with no yardage penalty. Chapter 5 suggests that the difference in penalties reflects a philosophy that grounding fouls should essentially be treated as if they were simply sacks of the passer. I would add an additional couple of suggestions about what the 2 categories reflect about philosophy. First suggestion: here's a little history. If you look way back in the past, Rule 7.3 did not list 2 categories of illegal forward passes. In my dog-eared copy of the 1990 NCAA Rules book, there are 6 provisions in 7.3.2 regarding illegal forward passes. By comparison, in my 2023 rules book, there are 8 provisions in the 2 sections I've been talking about. In the 1994 rule, the 4th item refers to the classic case of intentional grounding by throwing to save yardage into an area not occupied by an eligible Team A receiver. With some less specific wording, the other prohibitions we know today are in the other 5 provisions in that 1994 rules book, and today's provisions about exceptions for being out of the tackle box, of course, are missing. The point is that there is the same all-purpose penalty for all 6 illegal forward passes and the associated fouls in 1994. A loss of down with a 5-yard penalty from the spot of the foul. Sometime between 1994 and 2004, where the 2004 rules book is the next oldest edition in my personal library, the present two-section configuration emerged with today's separate penalty provisions for so-called grounding fouls. Essentially, the yardage portion of the penalty for illegal grounding disappeared. I see some sense in the current distinction in penalties. If a player grounds the ball to save time, he is still penalized in terms of time by the provisions for loss of down and for starting the clock on the ready. However, I see less sense in eliminating a yardage penalty for a player who grounds to save yardage. But hey, that's just me. Second suggestion. We often refer informally to fouls in Category 2 simply as grounding without the adjective intentional. However, that adjective intentional is probably a useful editorial choice and not redundant, because I think it's helpful conceptually for us to regard the provision that allows spiking the ball to kill the clock as the one means of grounding that is actually legal. For that matter, the exception for grounding from outside the tackle box is also a now legal means of grounding. Considering the different rules environment of 1994, it strikes me that in those days there really was not any notion of a legal grounding situation. Penalty enforcement for illegal forward passes. After an incomplete legal forward pass, the ball belongs to the passing team at the previous spot. That makes sense, since this is a legal forward pass play. After an incomplete illegal forward pass, the ball belongs to the passing team at the spot of the pass. This too makes sense, because there is no such thing as an illegal forward pass play. Such a play is, therefore, a running play, and the run segment of that play ends at the spot where the illegal pass is released. Therefore, the enforcement spot for fouls during a legal forward pass play is usually the previous spot, while the enforcement spot for a play that includes an illegal forward pass is usually the spot of the foul. But here is where you can really appreciate the value of using the Reading Study Guide. See what you think the ruling should be, for example, 5-8 on page 51. Here's how it reads, quote, leading by 5 points late in the game, Team A has 3rd and 10 at the A2. As the play develops, A21 is standing in his end zone and throws his team's second forward pass of the down. The pass is incomplete. End quote. Well, I'll give you the ruling in a moment. Meanwhile, here's a hint. There's an obscure exception in Rule 737C when, quote, an illegal forward pass is incomplete, end quote. We've just seen that the ball belongs to the passing team at the spot of the pass, as the rule says. But here's the exception. Quote, if Team B declines the penalty for an illegal pass thrown from the end zone, the ball shall next be put in play at the previous spot, end quote. Then there's a reference to approved ruling 737, items or plays Roman 2 and Roman 3. So what does this exception mean? Why is it part of the rule? Well, here's how Chapter 5 explains the reasoning. Without this exception, Team B would not have a genuine option, since both the result of the play and the consequence of the penalty would be safeties. Team B would thus be without a choice. This is on page 50. Indeed. So here's the ruling I promised you for example 5-8. Quote, without the exception to 737C, Team B would have to accept a safety, which does it no good. But the exception allows Team B to decline the penalty and have the ball next put in play at the previous spot, 4th down for Team A. Team B would likely prefer this, as it allows for the possibility of a blocked punt or a punt return for a touchdown. End quote. This is on page 51. The approved rulings referred to in the exception to Rule 737C and an example 5-8 introduce a couple of interesting twists to the scenario. In play Roman 2, Team A is running a fourth down play, and in play Roman 3, Team B intercepts the illegal forward pass and there is a short return. In play 2, Team A is called for intentional grounding in his end zone on fourth down, so Team B's options are to accept the penalty for a safety or decline the penalty and take first and goal at the previous spot. In play 3, on third down, Team A throws a second forward pass from its end zone that Team B intercepts and returns a short distance. So Team B's options are to accept the penalty for a safety or retain the ball at the end of the interception return. So now what about concepts concerning crossing the neutral zone? It's worth noting what it takes for a passer to be ruled beyond the neutral zone versus what it means for a pass to be ruled beyond the neutral zone. A passer, or any player for that matter, has crossed the neutral zone if his entire body has been beyond the neutral zone. A legal forward pass has crossed the neutral zone when it first strikes the ground, a player, an official, or anything in or behind the neutral zone in bounds. You can note that the same criteria apply to determining whether a scrimmage kick has crossed the neutral zone. I must address two quirks to assist your studying of the rules. The first quirk is the perhaps unexpected locations of the rules governing these situations. As is so characteristic of the rules book, the rules specifying when a pass or kick has crossed the neutral zone are to be found not in Rules 7 and 6, where you might expect to find them, but rather in Rule 2, for passes 2:19(3)A, and for kicks 2:18(7)B. Also in Rule 2 are the provisions covering when a passer and a kicker have crossed the neutral zone. The second quirk is that verb tense matters a lot in understanding the provisions regarding crossing of the neutral zone by a loose ball or by a player in possession of the ball. Here's a quick and dirty grammar refresher. Present tense refers to something that is happening contemporaneously at a particular time, such as concurrently when some other football action occurs. Present perfect tense refers to something that has happened prior to a particular time, such as before a football action occurs, and the ripple effect of the action is ongoing. The provisions you see about actions for which the neutral zone is a critical point of reference typically employ the present perfect form, quote, has been beyond, end quote, or, quote, has crossed, end quote, rather than the present tense form, quote, is beyond, end quote, or, quote, crosses, end quote. For example, one way to throw an illegal forward pass is to have been beyond the neutral zone and then to retreat behind it to throw the ball. Another way is for restricted interior linemen to have been more than 3 yards beyond the neutral zone before an otherwise legal forward pass is thrown. Excellent crew communication is often required to determine whether some action occurred early in a down that impacts or is impacted by what happens later in the down. Chapter 5 is all over this important topic. Quote, it is important to note that the key to an eligible's downfield is not so much where the ineligible player is when the pass is thrown as where he has been any time between the snap and the pass. That is, if he goes more than 3 yards downfield and returns behind the neutral zone before the pass is thrown, it is a foul. end quote. That's on page 56. I should add that Chapter 5 then reminds us that there is no foul related to ineligible receiver if there is an illegal forward pass. I should also add that if a pass doesn't in fact occur, or if there's a pass that doesn't cross the neutral zone, the eligibility rules for downfield interior linemen don't apply. We may be picking flags up, but that's what we should be doing if we have timely crew communication. Making a catch. Chapter 5 provides a 3-step recipe for determining whether a pass has been caught. The set of 3 verbs comprising the process make for a handy mnemonic: controlling, touching, and maintaining. In a football sense, making a catch requires that a player of either team check these 3 boxes. 1. Control the ball firmly with the arms or hands before the ball touches the ground. 2. Touch the ground in bounds with any part of the body. And 3. Maintain firm control of the ball long enough to perform a football act. Chapter 5 suggests a non-exhaustive list of verbs to describe what we must see to rule control. A player demonstrates that he controls the ball long enough to perform a football act when he can pitch or hand the ball, advance the ball, avoid or ward off an opponent, tuck the ball in, turn upfield, or extend the ball. If a player goes to the ground in the act of catching a pass, he must, quote, survive the ground, end quote, which means he maintains continuous control throughout the process of contacting the ground. A slight movement of the ball, even if it touches the ground, is acceptable as long as the player maintains firm control. To touch the ground in bounds after being airborne, an entire body part must touch in bounds. For a foot, that means if a toe hits inbounds followed by a heel on the sideline, a player has not touched inbounds. If an airborne player is contacted or shoved by an opponent so that his first contact with the ground is out of bounds, he has not completed a catch. But if an airborne player is held and carried such that he is prevented from immediately returning to the ground, he has completed a catch, and forward progress may be involved in determining where the ball should be marked. Roughing the passer, penalty enforcement. In this episode, I've already talked about how verb tense can be important. Thanks to another Reading clarification in Chapter 5, one about enforcing fouls for roughing the passer, I need to talk about one more bit of grammar. It seems that prepositions matter, too. Here's the deal. We certainly know that if a legal forward pass is complete, we tack on the 15-yard penalty for roughing to the end of the last run if that run ends beyond the neutral zone and if there is no change of team possession during the down. That's in 919B. In fact, a fairly recent addition to Rule 7 provides that we tack on 15 yards to the last run for any personal or unsportsmanlike conduct fouls during a legal forward pass play. That's in 7.3.12. Let me digress briefly to draw your attention to the charge given to us to assess from the, quote, last run, end quote, not from the, quote, lated run, end quote, as is typically the case. But this provision makes sense because the passer ceases to be a passer once the pass is complete. So by rule, the fouls covered here are not during any running play. There is no related run, so enforcement makes sense at the end of the last run. But back to the point about prepositions being important. Let's look at example 5-55 on page 65 to see what I mean. Here's the scenario. Quote, on third down, passer A12 is roughed after throwing a complete pass beyond the neutral zone to A28, who runs for 3 yards to the A42 and fumbles. A63 recovers the ball at the A45 while he is downed there. As I did earlier, I'll let you think about this a bit before I present the ruling shortly. Chapter 5 presents this example to support a discussion of enforcement of a roughing the passer penalty when there are indeed 2 or more runs. The question here is this: where is the end of the last run? Perhaps the better prior question is, how can it be claimed that there is more than one run during this down? There was a pass. Then there was A28's run. Then there was A28's fumble. Then there was the loose ball segment of A28's running play. A28's running play ended when A63 gained possession, but the ball became dead as soon as A63 gained possession. It would seem the only run during the down was by A28. A63 never ran with the ball. Since the run portion of A28's running play ended at the A42, where he lost possession, enforcement of the roughing penalty would seem to be from the end of the last and only run at the A42. Well, again, let's return to example 555 for the ruling. Here it is. Quote, "The penalty is enforced from the end of the last run, which is the A45. It'll be Team A's ball, 1st and 10, at the B40. End quote. Well, how about that? Well, here is Chapter 5's explanation. Had the fumble gone out of bounds, then the end of the last run would have been Team A's 42-yard line, which is where A28 lost it on the fumble. A reference here to 225.8b. If A63 had been able to run with the ball after recovering the fumble, with a loss or a gain, the end of the last run would be where the ball is finally declared dead in player possession. End quote. Again, that's page 65. I'll make the point Chapter 5 is hinting at. The second running play during this down started when A63 possessed the ball, and it happens that his run ended immediately, instantly, in fact, because the ball became dead in his possession. This example provides an excellent example of a general principle we can easily overlook. During any down, there can easily be a running play that we can fail to recognize because the run started and ended simultaneously. Such a running play occurs whenever a loose ball becomes dead in possession of an inbounds player who is down by rule. So, I still haven't made the point about the importance of choosing the right preposition. Here's one more example to finally make the point. Quote, example 5-57. 4th and 20 at the B40. After completing a forward pass to A89, A12 is roughed. A89 carries the ball to the B22, where he is driven out of bounds short of the line to gain. Ruling. Because the pass was complete and the possession change in the absence of the penalty would take place at the end of the down, the penalty is enforced from the end of the run, the B22. The half the distance penalty places the ball at the B11, where it is Team A's ball, 1st and 10. End quote. Is that the ruling you expected? Well, let the reading guide explain. It is worth discussing enforcement of the roughing the passer penalty when there is a change of team possession that comes at the end of the down rather than during the live ball action. The rule makes it clear that the penalty is enforced from the previous spot only if possession changes during the down, such as through an interception, rather than at the end of the down by rule, such as when the pass is complete but the receiver fails to make the line to gain on fourth down. Notice the wording in 919, quote, no change of possession during the down, end quote. And then, quote, for the entire passage, this is on page 65. And here's a comparable example with a bit of a twist. Example 5-58. On third and goal at the B12, A13 is roughed as he completes a pass to A83. I'm quoting here. At the B4, A83 fumbles. The ball rolls into Team B's end zone and over the end line. Ruling. The B4 is the end of the last run, so the roughing penalty will be enforced from that spot, half the distance to the goal. The automatic first down gives Team A first and goal at the B2. End quote. This is page 65. Can you guess what the rating guide's explanation is? See if you got this. Quote, even though the result of the play would give Team B the ball due to the touchback, that change of team possession would take place after the down is over, not during the down. Hence, the penalty is enforced from the end of the last run, not from the previous spot. End quote. Again, page 65. Take a look at Rule 919, and you'll see that the provision for penalizing from the end of the last run is contained in the very last single-sentence paragraph at the end of a lengthy text. And the sentence is not even marked as an exception, yet that is what, in fact, it is. And in fact, the sentence contains an exception to the exception it's presenting with the inclusion of the during preposition rather than an after preposition, including either instead of during or in addition to during. Backward pass. I'm going to wind things up by giving scant attention to the scant attention Chapter 5 gives to backward passes. It probably does not surprise you that 219.2 defines a backward pass as one that is not forward. After all, that is the same editorial approach that the NCAA rules take in defining a running play, which we recognize as any live ball action that is not a forward pass or a kick. By now, it probably does not surprise you, or at least should not surprise you, that you'll find the definition of passes in general not in Rule 7, but in Rule 2. It's also worth noting that the term lateral is used nowhere in the rules book or in any other authoritative source on football rules. If you want to announce to a coach or to your crewmates in a game that you're new to this, just use the term lateral. We recognize several important differences from a forward pass. You'll find these provisions scattered around the rules book as well in Rules 2, 7, and 9. Concerning a backward pass, there are no eligibility requirements for any player to catch, touch, or recover a backward pass, and once possession is gained, the ball continues in play. Any player may throw a backward pass at any time, anywhere, except for the purpose of stopping the clock. Players on the passing team are not allowed to bat a backward pass forward when it's in flight, though that's hardly surprising in view of the prohibition against any player batting a loose ball forward in the field of play or in any direction in the end zone. But there is this difference between batting a ball loose from a backward pass compared to batting a ball loose from other means. The penalty in either case is 10 yards, but there is no loss of down if the ball is loose from a backward pass. It is important to distinguish whether a ball is loose from a fumble or from a backward pass. A snap becomes a backward pass when the snapper releases the ball without a hand-to-hand snap. However, if the ball slips from the snapper's hands during the snap, the ball is loose from a backward pass, even though he didn't release the ball. And if a player muffs a hand-to-hand snap, the ball is also considered loose from a backward pass rather than from a fumble. Once a backward pass touches the ground, for the purpose of penalty enforcement for illegal batting or kicking, it now falls under the category of, quote, other loose balls, end quote, referenced in 941C. The ball remains loose from a backward pass, but now the important distinction as noted above may come into play if there's a subsequent penalty for batting other loose balls, which includes a loss of down. There's also this further complication. If an other loose ball has the status of being a legal scrimmage kick beyond the neutral zone, there is no loss of down. Here's yet another example of what is essentially an exception to an exception. We also recognize two important differences between a ball loose from a backward pass compared to a ball that is loose from a fumble. Concerning out of bounds, when a backward pass goes out of bounds between the goal lines, the ball belongs to the passing team at the out of bounds spot. When a fumble goes out of bounds between the goal lines, in advance of the end of the run, the ball belongs to the fumbling team at the spot of the foul. When a fumble goes out of bounds between the goal lines behind the end of the run, the ball belongs to the fumbling team at the out of bounds spot. And concerning a ball at rest, when a backward pass comes to rest in bounds and no player attempts to secure it, the ball becomes dead and belongs to the passing team at the dead ball spot. When a fumble comes to rest in advance of the end of the run, the ball belongs to the fumbling team at the spot of the fumble. And when a fumble comes to rest behind the end of the run, the ball belongs to the fumbling team at the dead ball spot. I'll close with two illustrative examples from Chapter 5 on page 67. I'm quoting here for both examples. Example 5-64. On fourth down, Team A's quarterback pitches the ball toward A34, who muffs the ball. The loose ball is forced across the neutral zone for several yards and is recovered and downed by A79 beyond the line to gain. Ruling, 1st and 10 for Team A. The ball is not a fumble, so it belongs to Team A where downed. The clock starts on the ready. Example 5-65, A30 is at the B2 where he, A, throws a backward pass to A40 at the B5, or B, fumbles. A40 muffs the ball, which rolls into Team B's end zone, where it comes to rest under a large pile of players. The ball is found with no player in possession. Ruling, in A, it is a touchdown for Team A. The dead ball belongs to the passing team at the dead ball spot, which is in Team B's end zone. In B, the ball belongs to the fumbling team, which is Team A, and is returned to the spot of the fumble, the B2. The scenario in example 5-65 strikes me as far-fetched. It's hard to imagine that in the pile, no player would find a way to snatch the ball. Nevertheless, the example is certainly instructive concerning the important implications of determining the status of a loose ball. That is, we always need to determine first how a ball became loose. A closing word. As with last week's episode concerning scrimmage requirements, the length of this episode confirms that there's more than meets the eye concerning a facet of games that we see a lot of. I'll repeat my counsel from last week, that we must discipline our study habits to honestly assess what we know, what we don't know, and what we don't know we need to know. I hope you'll make time to listen to next week's episode for a discussion of Chapter 6 of the Reading Study Guide, covering the running game and forward progress. I see a pattern emerging here that there's a lot more than meets the eye for virtually every phase of the game. Remember, I'm a member of the Austin Football Officials Association, and we're open for new applicants right now. Our extensive training in the classroom, through Zoom, and with on field experience in 4 locations in the Central Texas area began last week. So don't delay. We're very pleased to see that we have a large rookie class of men and women for whom we are providing hands on instruction in 4 convenient locations around Central Texas. If you'd like to learn more about us, contact us. You can email us at recruiting@afoa.ws, visit our website at www.austinfootballofficials.org, call us at 512-298-2987, or on your favorite social media platforms, use one of these hashtags, hashtag TXHSFB, hashtag NOWHIRING. Until next time, have a great week.